Good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, taking place on Tuesday, the 19th of July, in the Chamber. And apologies that we've had to move back down into the Chamber, given the adverse weather conditions. The committee room was a bit like an oven this afternoon, so we thought it would be better to move back down here for this meeting. So thank you. And also, you all obviously got the email about the dress code, and you've come suitably attired for a relaxed evening. Gotcha.
Well, you were looking at me, Chair, when you were saying that. How do you know this isn't my best costume?
I was just going to mention that to Councillor Norman. So, without further ado, before we start, could I just let members know we have with us this evening Stonell Phelps. Stonell is here on work experience with the council for this week from the primary school. So he is here observing what we do as a council, but interestingly, he couldn't have picked a better committee to attend tonight, as we have an item on the agenda, which he has been able to feed into us for us, which will be of great value when we get to that. So welcome, Stonell. You're very welcome with us this evening. Do we have apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies from councillors Gwilt, A. Little, Ho and A. Yates.
Any other apologies? Declarations of interest. Anyone? Okay. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th of June 2022.
Chair, I just wanted to pick up that I know comments were made at full council and we have made those amendments.
Thank you. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true record of those minutes? Thank you very much. Item 4, health matters. Councillor Norman.
Yes, well, I was privileged to attend in your place, Chair, although I didn't get a free parking space. And I've done what I think is an accurate report, a brief but accurate report of what went on. The members can look at the agenda there, which is always full of acronyms, abbreviations, although they're usually spelled out, to be fair, and technical comments. But essentially, the items I've picked out here, which are pretty well all the items. First one is the integrated care system, which is now active, and you see it's 42 integrated care partnerships and 42 integrated care boards. That was previously the community commissioning groups, and there should never have been 6 clinical commissioning groups in the first place, in my view. But 6 is what was done at the time. So that's it really. There were road shows and things like this, although members may not have attended them or even heard about them, to be quite honest, though I think they've tried to advertise those. The primary care update there was about the appointments in general practice, and the figures there I just picked out from the report shows it's equivalent now to pre-COVID, which is 2009, April 2019, in line with the April 2022 figures. I've just mentioned that when I'm in bold, it means that I'm referring to something in particular, and I was struck with the paragraph on the presentation, the training and development, and it says, financial well-being. We recognise that this is a difficult time for our NHS people, and we know that financial concerns have consistently been in the top 5 reasons our people call the free support helpline run by the Samaritans. So I did ask them about that, and you can see their response on the web page if you wish, but I was rather struck by that. The update on maternity services, which you raised at the last meeting, Chair, and others are raised here at the Scrutiny Committee, just give an update on that. I did ask the though about whether it was a long-term future or not for the Samuel Johnson maternity unit, because it is about on-demand services, and the Ockenden report, which I referred to at the bottom there, which is something that's sort of hanging over the heads of everybody in the NHS with regard to maternity services, pointed out how short we are of midwives and so on. And again, that's in the Ockenden report, but it was clearly an issue that is concerned locally and indeed nationally. But the service will be open at the end of the year according to this, and also be able to give birth at home as well, as I understand it. On Health Watch, I did ask Mrs. Sound like I didn't get it right there.
Add to. Just to comment on that, I did make a request that any other significant changes to what we're being told at that particular meeting to do with Samuel Johnson and the freestanding maternity birthing unit, that we kept informed of that. And I think that that's really important, actually, that we've been given this commitment now, but to make sure that anything else that does change, we are advised.
Thank you, Chair. And on the Health Watch there, I did ask that they'd actually, well, I did ask if there was going to be training of Health Watch volunteers and the lay people in there as well as staff, because if anybody's read the Mid-Staff's inquiry, they will see that there was a lack of scrutiny there, which was of great concern to the inquiry, and that included the predecessor of Health Watch at the time, and they seem to think that that would be a good idea, and I'll keep an eye on that to see that that does get done, because it is important to ask the right questions in these circumstances. On the District Council's report, at each meeting, there's a report from the District Borough Council. This is just a very brief report. But one of the issues was that what I was impressed with was that the chair on 3 occasions said he'd make sure the district and borough councils, meaning local councillors, were informed of various aspects of what was going on the Health Scrutiny Committee. So that was good. There was an error there still to be dealt with on their membership of the Lichfield district. Well, we haven't got a health scrutiny membership there for the health scrutiny at the district, at the county, sorry, and writing to them to get that corrected. And there is a difference between us. We've got one scrutiny committee where Tamworth, Cannock, South Staffordshire and all the rest have a dedicated health scrutiny committee, but some do seem to have a very wide brief. It's not always health matters, it's green open spaces, it's climate change, it's housing. So, you know, I don't think we're going to be missing out on that, although this health scrutiny committee is for a 2-year trial, if you like, or at least to be reviewed next year. And we look at that aspect of it when it comes to that review. Also asked about the Robert Peel and Samuel Johnson items. Well, the fact that they were considered at the health scrutiny, it affects more than one district. They did, well, both of those, and so does, as far as I'm concerned, the Burnwood Health and Wellbeing Centre in Burnwood, which was a temporary building, renewed twice at least, going back to 2008. And that does cover more than one district as well. And there is a reference there to the joint code of conduct. This was at the previous time it was asked. And I don't know what that means exactly, but I'm writing to the chair and popping in the officer there to get some clarification on that. So he wanted me again to contact him and look at that. So I hope that's useful. As I say, the reports, as you know, Chair, and others, and your predecessor knows, they're quite lengthy reports and very detailed, but trying to cut through and get what's going to be happening and how it affects us is the issue, I suppose. I haven't asked any questions, which I probably can't answer.
Does anybody have any questions at all for Councillor Norman? I think the one thing I would say is that the fact we've only got one OE and Scrutiny Committee is fine, in as much as we have representatives on the district council who are also county councils who sit on the other health and wellbeing scrutiny committees at county. So I'm sure they will be minded to let us know of anything that actually comes up, or at least inform me and the vice chair of any issues that need to be brought back to this committee. So I'm relatively happy with that situation, that we'll get that feedback there. But thank you, Councillor Norman, for going in my place and having a nice day in Stafford.
Have you been to Stafford recently?
Yesterday.
It's difficult to have a nice day at Stafford now. Most of the things that are interesting have gone.
Moving on, we have the work programme for the Health and Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And we do note that the meeting on the 1st of August, we've got the ICF Transformation George Bryan feedback from the Healthier Community Workshop. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring up about the mental health matters, because we did say in council, or I did last time, that it is vital that we get to grips with mental health issues, particularly in young people, and CAMS is not working effectively. I noticed it is on the work programme, but there's no scheduled date. So has anybody got any idea as to when that might happen? Because it really needs to be done sooner rather than later, because mental health issues do not go away, they actually get worse. And certainly I would like to see some things in place during the new academic year. Thank you.
Okay, we have received a letter for the members of the Health and Care Review and Scrutiny Committee in relation to the George Bryant Centre. At this stage, I don't know whether this letter is confidential or whether it's something that can be shared with this committee at this stage, or whether I ought to wait until the next meeting of the committee in August, rather than me announcing what's on this letter. I'm not altogether sure. I'll take advice as whether we should publish what's in the letter or just wait until it's actually presented at the meeting of the board in August. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I have received a letter. So obviously I will share it with the vice chair, but that's as far as we will, and it does relate to a matter that's coming up on the 1st of August anyway. So it will be tabled at that meeting. So it's probably best if we leave it till then and I'll come back or at least give a view from us at that meeting on the 1st of August. But I will share it with the vice chair at this stage. Everyone okay with that? Yeah. Have you had the letter as well? Okay. Okay. So was there anything else in relation to health and care, in relation to the work programme, or anything else that anyone wanted us to raise? Particularly, we've got the mental health concerns and issues. Anything else? Or we're happy to go with the work programme that they've produced? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Lovely. Thank you very much. So we now have a verbal update from Deputy Leader, Councillor Ian Eady, on the Burnwood Town deal. Ian, join us. Oh, and your boss is going to join us as well. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think as an introduction to this, the Burnwood Town deal has been going for some time now, and I can't remember. And we produced minutes and notes, but I can't remember it ever coming to an overview and scrutiny committee or to cabinet or in that case to full council. But it's ongoing work that has been going on between ourselves, the county council, and Burnwood Town Council. So I think it's a good idea to at least have an update as to where we are, what are some of the concerns and what are some of the obligations and thoughts about how we progress that further. So Councillor Eady, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, for the benefit of members appreciating the conversation that you and I had, which is some people might not be aware of what the Burnwood Town deal is. It's a partnership between the County Council, Lichfield District Council and Burnwood Town Council. We don't have such a relationship for any of our other parishes or settlements, but it's very much obviously in place, recognising the importance of Burnwood as the second settlement in our district. In terms of participants, from the County Council side of things, there is 3 division members, if I get the correct phraseology, and they're represented on the town deal by the chairman, Councillor Wilcox. He's joined, as is relevant, by officers from the County Council, and typically it's Wayne Motorboys, but obviously others attend as is required. From the District Council side, the leader and myself attend, and obviously with officer support. We provide the secretariat services to Sarah Slay, and from Burnwood Town Council perspective, both the leader and deputy leader of Burnwood Town Council attend, along with their town clerk as well. As Councillor Wilcox said, the town deal has been in place for some time. The purpose of it is obviously to try and provide both local guidance and coordination in terms of delivering a number of strategic projects and programmes. So to give you an idea, obviously development in terms of the various settlements, retail offers, as you've already covered in your previous item, to consider obviously improvement to health facilities, looking at things such as appropriate housing mix for Burnwood and the wider settlement, enabling obviously older people to keep their independence, looking at obviously family size properties to be better utilised, looking at obviously how we can achieve better transport links, cycleways and footpaths, and looking at the opportunities for people to have leisure and health improvement, as well as obviously tourism, given the proximity of Chasewater. We meet on a fairly regular basis. There is no set timetable as to when that does happen, but obviously it's as is relevant. The last meeting that we had, albeit it was out and about, was on the 11th of May, when we went around the Sankey Corners area of Burnwood, looking at the possibilities of what could be done. Obviously, from a local perspective, Burnwood Town Council members obviously wish to raise the issues in terms of obviously open space that's been left that way by the landowner. Obviously, what could be done to the existing shopping areas, again, that is in private ownership, but equally as well, looking at opportunities for community space. They highlighted that they've been looking at the project, obviously, of the derelict pub at Sankey's Corner, and whether or not that could be turned into a community space. That obviously, as a series of projects, is ongoing, and obviously from Lichfield District Council's perspective, it's very much in our minds, and when we're looking at obviously UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because obviously I know the leader and I are keen to ensure that all parts of the district benefit from that funding when it comes forward. We have engaged obviously with external parties as is relevant, so at our February meeting, we had Nick Burgess representing LCP Property, obviously again having 5 brownfield sites in and around the Burnwood area, obviously looking to press them to see them come forward for relevant development. And I know certainly obviously Councillor Norman has been very forthright in making his views known when they've tried to put in residential accommodation applications for what is an area that's identified both in our local plan and the Burnwood neighbourhood plan, actually for retail. So some of the things obviously that we've been looking at is those, as well as obviously what the local plan identifies doing is an area action plan, to look at the whole of the Burnwood settlement in terms of where we need to look and focus our attentions. And we've been working on various different things. So again, you may be better placed to give comments on it than I am, Chairman, is obviously in terms of Sankey's Corner. I know that the County Council committed money to look at a study in terms of how the traffic flow could be improved. That has obviously been delivered in terms of what the possibilities are. Now it becomes a question of saying, would the County Council manage to find the funding to actually bring that forward? We've looked at various things through obviously the likes of the Welcome Back Fund. Could we offer any support to the Town Council in terms of developing things like their Heritage Trail from a tourism perspective? And certainly obviously just to give you an idea of things that, if members are interested from a Lichfield District Council perspective, we are trying to obviously facilitate and support. I'm very grateful to Councillor Darren Ennis for the work that he's doing in conjunction with Jonathan Percival to look at the possibility of a business improvement district for Burnwood. Obviously, to date, Lichfield District Council has funded the initial work, and we made a commitment as well that we would fund the majority of bringing that bid forward if it was found to be a viable project. We obviously were through our grant scheme for new events, able to support the pilot project for the Burnwood markets. And I think all credit to Burnwood Town Council, who have then taken that on and deliver it now on a regular basis. We've looked at obviously spending money again from Welcome Back Fund to improve the local parks in and around the Burnwood area. Both Chasetown Park, Elder Park, Redwood Park and Chase Terrace, in terms of looking at simple things like getting the fences and the gates and the benches painted. Obviously, one of the big things that members will have seen from underspend in the last financial year's council budget is we were able to identify approximately £72,500 to put new play equipment into Burnwood. We've also refurbished Swan Island and Chasetown toilets, New fencing went into part of Burntwood Park, and we continue to look wherever there is underspend in the main core budget at whether or not we can do things to improve Burntwood, as well as obviously, as I mentioned earlier, looking at things like the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to see what that would allow us to do in terms of bringing forward capital projects in and around the Burntwood area. Probably at that point, I'm going to pause, Chairman, and we will come any questions.
Thank you for that, Councillor Reid. Just to add to the meeting that took place in May, there was a commitment by Philip White, Deputy Leader of the County Council, to put resource into a joint venture with the District Council and Brentwood Town Council. And I know that David Moore and the equivalent at County Council were going to go away and look at that and look at a plan of action as to what could be brought forward and what the sort of costs and also looking at the derelict pub. Now, obviously, David Moore, I think, has moved on. So I suppose there'll be a replacement that will take on doing this work and working with the officers at the County Council to take that work forward, I assume.
The short answer is yes, you're quite right. David Moore was with us on a temporary contract. Obviously, that has come to an end. I know, not seeking to speak for him, the leader has regular discussions, obviously, with the chief executive in terms of regeneration as a whole for the district. That post will be filled. I think the key thing, obviously, that at the end of the day we need to identify is how would you fund that coming forward, and that's paramount in our minds. Obviously, I think from the conversations that we've had with again Councillor Woodward and Councillor Darren Ennis, I know that Brentwood Town Council, from what they tell me, has engaged with the landlord. They seem keen to offer up the opportunity for sublease. I believe they've done an element of costing where they believe they could make it financially viable year on year, but obviously that only becomes possible if money comes from somewhere to carry out the refurbishment. So it's very much up there. We're looking at how we secure the money, and then obviously from there we'll have relevant officer support to bring it forward, whichever one of the 2 or 3 parties that are involved in the town deal are the right ones to do so.
Just adding to that before I bring members in, there is certainly a commitment from Philip White to actually invest in Burntwood. It not been there on many occasions, but he was I think pleasantly surprised what was happening in Burntwood and the area around there, and certainly the links with Chasewater and that being an asset to the County Council. So we will, as County Council, pursue that with them to make sure that there is something is forthcoming and that it doesn't die a death, and that actually we do see some good working relations between the county, the district, and the town council. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by thanking the Deputy Leader and Leader for bringing this along? I think it's something that we need to keep our eye on. I know the council is currently engaged in a couple of major projects, one outside and obviously one around north of Lichfield as well. And I think nobody will be more pleased than Councillor Strachan, as it may mean that I don't have to ask him where the revenue funding for this town deal is when we have audit on Thursday. But just on the point you raised there regarding funding and where funding is going to come for that, I'm aware that Lichfield District Council was unsuccessful with its bid to the Levelling Up Fund last year to fund the replacement leisure centre. Have we made any thoughts? Have we touched base? Have we discussed with the MPs who would need to, with the MP who would need to support any application through Levelling Up Fund round 2 or any of the other, I think it's 8 different funding sources there are through the Department for Levelling Up and whatever the hell the rest of it is these days.
Thank you for the question. The reality is we will be asking MP for support. Obviously, what we're targeting in terms of looking at potential source of funding is how we would spend the money that we know we're going to get through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and therefore it's not levelling up in that sense. Excuse me. So it's a known source as long as it's deemed to be acceptable.
Thank you, Chair. So just from that, I mean, obviously the funding's coming in from Shared Prosperity Fund. Does that mean that until that's dealt with, we're not looking at any of the funds until that's kind of in the books, or is it something that's kind of bubbling away in the background and will hopefully come forward as and when we can identify something?
No, we're not necessarily looking at any other funds at this particular point in time because we know that we have approximately 3.2 million coming to us from the UK Share Prosperity Fund. So therefore, we will be looking at obviously using that money. As I understand it, obviously you've mentioned levelling up. The council has made an application to round 2 of the levelling up money. Again, my understanding, and I'll look to either the very kind portfolio holder who also delivers water, or indeed the leader. I believe we have again, as a district council, made an application for levelling up monies to go towards the new leisure centre.
I can confirm that, Chairman, yes. Thank you. Any, Councillor Norman?
Yes, so I'm grateful for Councillor Ely to come along and give this report, have written reports in the future, starting with the minutes of what's been said this evening. It's just been demonstrated why Burntwood needs a special look here, because we've just been talking about the leisure centre in Lichfield. We've got there's a task group on that, a multi-million-pound leisure centre. There's a multi-million-pound city centre plan in Lichfield, and we're talking about Burntwood and Hamwich. And he mentioned the multi-million-pound Lichfield Garrick Theatre and the millions that we have subsidised over the past year. So you'll forgive me if I don't feel too grateful for some concentration on Burntwood. So I'm grateful for the recent interest. Looking at the action plan that I've got here, the timescales are all medium to long, all very vague. There's nothing a bit specific. I think that's what I understand the concern is, that pinning people down to when something will happen. You mentioned an officer who was here yesterday and now gone, and certainly hadn't looked at the site before he arrived. And there's other sort of problems as well, but show that there's a lack of real commitment here, I think, who turns up for these meetings and so on. Of course, not referred to Councillor Ely on my chair on that. I know he's very supportive of this. But the main one, I think, is the Sankey's Corner. I can't get a handle on what is happening with Sankey's Corner, except that, you know, a meeting after meeting after meeting, the discussion, but no real action as far as I can see. If I can be corrected on that, that's great, but I'm not aware of any real actions, and I certainly want to further report on this to see where we can actually pin people down and say, look, this is happening in Burntwood. The background to this is the fact that there's been bad planning over many decades in Burntwood. We haven't got a centre as such, and that's why it's referred to in the local plan, supported by the local plan, supported by the neighbourhood plan. I suppose that's that way around. But we just need some, you know, specifics here. When are things going to happen? I've seen some of the funding, and I'm not impressed with the funding, because the county and the district are want to put in the same amount as the town council. In, you know, multi-million-pound county, multi-million-pound district, and the less than £1 million town council putting in the same amount of money. I won't get into the details of those. But what I would like to hear from Councillor Ely is, when can we actually get some concrete proposals, concrete times down for the Sankey's Corner particular developments and that? I'd be grateful.
I'm grateful for the questions, Councillor Norman. If you're referring to obviously the county council highway scheme, then that's not something I can give you an answer on. That question would need to be directed obviously to the county council. And I would imagine, obviously, given the comments from the chairman earlier, he'd be quite happy to take that back. I know both Councillor Woodward and Councillor Ennis have shared their frustrations that things are not coming forward as quickly as they would like. Certainly, obviously, we may need to disagree in terms of lack of commitment. Lichfield District Council is absolutely committed. It is putting its money where its mouth is, and spending to create improvements. Indeed, again, you know, potentially that is one of the frustrations that we found as we learn our way forward, which is, you know, the Burntwood Town Council, and I understand it, feel that necessarily we've got on and delivered things without necessarily looping them in as effectively as we could have done. But certainly in terms of lack of commitment, that's not on the part of Lichfield District Council. We are getting on with it. In terms of Sankey's Corners improvements, obviously I've mentioned already how we are looking as a council that we can support that, and I've identified the need to do so. in terms of the wider Sankey's Corner area, you know, the biggest project that I'm aware of there sits with the county council to deliver. And obviously we will continue to keep looking if we have specific identified projects that we want to bring forward that collectively, that we can try and find the money to do that. I know obviously you've got to your feet when we were looking at the budget and obviously raised the prospect of a fund to invest in Burntwood. If we can get specific projects, this authority will definitely look at trying to deliver what the people of Burntwood are asking for.
Okay, I'll bring you back there.
Well, only briefly, I'm grateful to reply, and what I certainly would want as the district councillor for Burntwood as well as the town councillor is help from Councillor Reedy and Councillor Pullen in putting pressure on the county to help Councillor Wilcox and others that have been keen to help to actually get some of that funding and some action from the county council. Because if it's a partnership, then you know various partners in that partnership can actually help others. And I did notice about not keeping us in the loop, and certainly with the parks, as I think Councillor Reedy is aware that we weren't kept in the loop about what was happening with the parks in Burntwood, which is a great shame, and hopefully that will not happen in the future. Communication is quite important, but I'm grateful for Councillor Reedy's response to that.
Certainly in relation to the county council, I will personally speak to Philip White to see where we are in relation to. I think I'm not sure whether the report has now been published or whether the town council had a copy of the report that was due June, July time. I'm not sure whether that's been published, but I will find out. But from my recall, I think the cost involved was something like £4 million would be needed to do the work that's been identified within that report. And obviously that sits with the county council. So I'm happy to go away and find out where we are with that and report back on that part of it to this committee. Councillor Latham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll share my define Burntwood. It's a huge sprawl, and usually we struggle to understand what we mean by that word Burntwood. Advice, please.
Councillor.
Well, it tends to include the triangle ward of Hammerwich, who think they live in Burntwood until they want to get buried, and then they find out they've got to pay more. But it's mostly Burntwood and part of Hammerwich, and that's 28,000 population. It's very straightforward. It is that body.
On a map, where does it start?
I can draw a map, but as you know, there is Lemonsley in all sorts of places in Lichfield. But there is a sort of literal city. It's the parish of Burntwood, I should say. I don't want to make it complicated. It is the parish of Burntwood, and maps are available.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, probably I'm going to be somewhat repetitious, but I, along with everybody else, and particularly the public who have expressed their concern about Sankey's Corner for years, I was on the original town deal when it started, and it seems to me that for a long time it stagnated, and we have been let down time and time again, promised things that have never materialized. And I appreciate what Councillor Reedy has said now, but I do think that we need actions, and we need them soon, because we can be a talking shop forever. And I know we need the money to do that, but even so, the longer it goes on, the more money we will require. So I do think it is vitally important that we move forward as quickly as possible. And I also wanted to mention that we weren't involved in the parks, which was a disappointment, as Councillor Norman has said, that these things were put in place in a park without any consultation with the town council at all. So I know that you are in conversation with both Councillor Woodward and Councillor Ennis, but it is important that we can see the results. And as we are relying a lot on that support from the three councils, it is vitally important that if you can speak to the county, that is important to us. And certainly we can continue to discuss with the town council. But really, we need actions rather than words, and we need them soon.
Thank you. Councillor Pullen.
Thank you. You'll grab this off me in a minute. Yes, I mean, I take the points that Councillor Evans has made. Nobody wants to see this just be a talking shop. And again, I absolutely get the frustrations that Councillor Woodward and Councillor Ennis has expressed, and indeed has been expressed by Councillor Evans tonight. As I said earlier, I would like to think that LDC at this point in time is putting its money where its mouth is. We touched on the biggest thing, obviously, as far as Sankey's Corner is concerned, as I understand it, is the traffic scheme. And to go back to Councillor Norman's point, we will absolutely lend any support that we can to the county councillors and to make the highways budget bigger, that would allow this scheme to be afforded. Again, I said at the start, this is a unique relationship that we have here with Burntwood Town Council as the parish council. We do not do this with any other of our parishes. The words on the tip of my tongue is we are trying to give special treatment here to Burntwood because we recognise the importance of it as our second settlement. In terms of, again, just to touch on that point, if we were to make improvements to any of our parks or open spaces in the district, within reason, we would deliver that. We would not go and consult the parish councils. As I've said earlier, I recognise that we didn't do it when we have a partnership working with Burntwood Town Council, but we did, and again, it's a lesson for us to learn. We did consult, albeit with the Lichfield District Council ward members, some of whom are obviously dual hatters. So in reality, I fully recognise that we didn't do it as effectively we should have done. I said we will look to do that better, but obviously, again, at the heart of it, we're investing in, forget Lichfield, forget Burntwood, we're investing in the district's parks, and we chose to do so, recognising the importance of Burntwood when there was spare money within the budget to do it in Burntwood.
Anybody else? Yeah. Should we cancel?
Thanks, Chair. Just some clarity, please, on the issues with the negotiations on the vacancy fund and how much of a barrier that is potentially to any developments that do want to take place.
At this point in time, we as a district council haven't been engaged in the discussions. That's something that Burntwood Town Council, as we understand it, has led. We are very much at the early stage. Obviously, what we took from the May meeting and recognising obviously some of the, forgive me, the difficulties that have come out of decisions that the county council have made recently in terms of some of their property holdings and displacing local groups, that there is a need obviously for a community space. Again, Burntwood Town Council, from the discussions that we've had, particularly obviously with deputy leader and leader, feel that they could make a viable business if funding is available to obviously refurbish the property which has been lying, not in use for a period of time. If we can identify a funding source that we believe we now have, then it gives us the opportunity to go back to the points I've made, to put an action now to actually try and deliver something for the benefit of Burntwood and the residents in and around.
Councillor Pullen.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor already touched on some of the points I was going to make, but I think what would be really helpful, and something that will be covered by Birmingham Town Day and our next meeting, is about really what the respective parties' responsibilities are. And it should not entirely fall upon Lichfield District Council to lead Birmingham Town deal. The county council, the district council, and the parish council all have different resources available to them. But we all want to be equal partners in that, and we want to drive forward. So we need to recognise that, recognise where our individual strengths are, use them, and all work together to deliver for Burntwood to see some of the things that we want to happen there. And when Councillor Evans says, we want to see results, well, you can see the monthly market, for instance, which is a great example of partnership working. That is there now. It is happening. You can see the improvement to the parks that are happening. We do provide secretariat support for Birmingham Town Deal because we are committed to making it work. And I think we need to be really careful also about Sankey's Corner and understanding that it's not in our ownership. Therefore, that naturally limits some of the influence we can have over it. I'm particularly really keen that we complete on our work in Lichfield in terms of the Birmingham road site,
and in terms of the leisure centre, etc., so that we can start freeing up and actually looking at what else we need to get done within the district. But I think we've also got to be realistic that in terms of the bandwidth that we have of delivering major projects, it's full, it's the pipeline. We need to get those out as quickly as we possibly can to work on some of these quite exciting projects that we're starting to see emerge in Burntwood now. And I'm very much looking forward to working with both Councillor Evans and Councillor Norman on those.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fulham. Yeah, I think it's fair to say we have seen the improvements now happening in Burntwood. As you say, the markets, the work that's gone to the parks and the toilets, etc. So at least now we've had a report tonight. So at least we have the starting point so that we can make sure that we can now follow up on that to make sure that it's in part of on our work programme to get periodic reports back. And certainly I can do that from the county council's point of view, and obviously we can get an update from the town council and the district council accordingly. So I think we've got a mechanism here now that we can do that. So be sure we'll put that into the work programme, make sure we do have regular updates to see where we're going. And as soon as we know anything more concrete in relation to what's happening with the derelict pub, or the money coming through from the UK Austerity Fund and things going forward, particularly from the county, we'll bring them back to the committee and we can then make sure that we're fully briefed on what's happening. Are members okay with that? We take that forward? Yeah. Thank you very much, both Councillor Reid and Councillor Fulham, for helping us do that. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, if we can, please, which is the proposal for a youth council. And I think Councillor Cox is going to join us and deliver this to us. Thank you. Just while Councillor Cox is getting himself into place, certainly in relation to, we've got a paper on this, but it was certainly helpful. We had our first pre-scrutiny Zoom meeting. I'm trying to think, last week it was now. We need to make sure going forward where we can, we need better attendance, please, if we can. I know on this occasion it was changed to a time that wasn't convenient. That's because it clashed, unfortunately, with another committee that needed to happen. But to get full value, if we can try and make sure that we'll give the dates tonight, that they're in your diary, because certainly from the one we had last week, there was certainly additional information that we wanted to see come forward to this meeting this evening, which you will see will be part of the presentation that comes forward. So I think it is really worthwhile having that, just so that we can make sure we've looked at the papers. Anything more information that we think we need to help us on the night is certainly useful. So without further ado, Councillor Cox, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, pleased that we're bringing this paper forward to you, and it'll go to Cabinet hopefully in September. I think I don't wish to go through the report as you've read it. I'm not one of those that chooses to debate and hopefully you've read it anyway. But the clear objective, obviously, is that engagement that we want to be with the youth of our district. And listen to obviously what they have to say. So it's putting out that platform together, and this is the first stage of it, and then we can put the bits and pieces going forward. So I'm quite happy to straight the questions, because I think that's what we're here for, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. And if not, I'll need to get back to you then on them.
Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. Start off by saying I think it's a brilliant idea. I've got maybe half a dozen points. Do you want them all in one or one by one, Rich? All together. Okay. First observation, there's the very definite link to schools, which I can see why. But when we went through COVID, we had the issue with all host schools pupils who couldn't get access to teacher assessments. So by focusing on schools, are we missing out on anyone who's homeschooled, and how will they get involved? Second point, clearly dealing with young people, we've got safeguarding issues. I didn't pick up anything in this report about how that's going to be dealt with, and whether we need to be thinking about DBS checks and how people are going to be engaging with the young people when they come through there. I spotted the point that there'll be founding schools involved, and I'm interested to understand which schools will be part of that founding group. I was also interested to understand why it was 6 from each school. And I immediately jumped to Councillor Robertson's point last week at council with sort of fair representation. Is it right that we're doing a number per school rather than representing a number of their peer group? And as you'd expect, clearly when it comes into finances and budget, I was interested to understand what protections and controls are going to be put in there to almost protect the young people from any potential allegations of inappropriate use of funds, that sort of thing, because I think it is a responsibility. And we know that there is pressure on public finances, so there will be a level of scrutiny of what they're spending, and bringing people in, we can't afford any risks that anything can come back on them if they're just left alone with the budgets. So those are my queries.
Councillor Grange, that's brilliant, because they're exactly some of the issues that are brought up in the pre-meeting. So I know Councillor Cox will have the answers to these and he won't have to go away and come back. Councillor Cox.
I'd like to say it was the temperature and the weather that was making me sweat, but it might be here. I think the link to the schools is a good question, which it was looked at as just directly with schools. I think we do need to look at where we are missing out, if we are missing out, in terms of what capacity we have to bring in others, in terms of, I don't know, groups or what of that nature. But I think in terms of it was based through the schools that we were looking at, which probably leads on to the DBS question, is that we would rather be looking at that the schools will be running the situation themselves within their own organisation, and with obviously support from officers from LBC. So hopefully that process will be confined to the schools, if that answers that question. You're quite right in terms of 2 schools. Why 2? And this is a pilot. I think what there will be a view is that we see how we go with the 2 schools, see how it operates. But I think the ambition is to push it out on a larger scale that would be all inclusive in terms of our schools and representations. But initially, I would think we'd be looking at the school from Burnford, which we have engaged to, and then also in Lichfield, which we'll take forward with head teachers. So that's where we're with there. There will be, in terms of the finances, the officers there will be a close eye on this, because you're quite right. We can't have somebody making vast decisions that are going to clear out that budget. We're only on a small budget for the first year, £10,000, which is, as you'll see, it's obviously then increased. Sorry?
It's all for you.
No, obviously, £10,000 is not small, but in terms of where we want to go with it, there was an increment increase that we will do, because we are then improving on it. Hopefully that we will get to a point where that budget has to be expanded. And I think the budget that certainly is where key is to have transport available for those that don't have the flexibility, or parents that can help out. So at least we're going to make that as a provision, because again, that is it wouldn't be inclusive if we were doing otherwise. I hope that I might have crossed points that you raised.
Yes, thank you. I think it's taking on board your point. This is a pilot. I think as we work through, and there will inevitably be problems that come up. So I think it will be interesting to make sure it comes back to this committee as it progresses. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think on that note, I would fully expect to be here going forward with it, because I think it's important that it is scrutiny. It is near the Lichfield district, and I think it does need that level of scrutiny. So I'd welcome that.
I think there really is a great opportunity for us to get really involved in this, and because it's something new that we can add to. And obviously that will get amended as things go forward, but we'll keep a close eye on it. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is an idea that Birchwood had at one time, but it has not got off the ground. However, I think it's an excellent idea, and I did ask at the pre-meeting, which schools, why just 2 schools? Because there are a number of right across the district that would perhaps like to embrace it at the beginning. And so that concerns me a little bit. If you're going to have 6 people from each school or on your initial one, when you could have less and more schools involved. Because I don't want anybody to feel, any school to feel that they're being neglected as a result of not being asked to contribute. We do need to recognise that. There are, of course, also people that leave school at the end of year 11 and go to colleges. Have you taken that into consideration? Because a number of students from across the district will end up in colleges. And of course, I think the fact that you're going to embrace so many different groups is really important. That's what we should be looking at, so that we value everybody that is going to be a member of this. I also think that we need to understand the how you're going to get those people involved. Is it going to be each school is going to do an election themselves, or how are you going into schools to talk about it? How are they going to get involved in the first instance? Maybe you've already done some homework on that. I don't know, but it is important that come September, everybody recognises that this thing will be in place. And of course, some students will leave at the end of year 11, some will leave at the end of 12 and 13. So, but you're looking at a wide age range as well, which again is good, because everybody, we've got a number of students in every school that really want to have their voice heard, because we need representatives from all those schools to say what they want. But we also need action when you get it, because if you don't do that, we've done it before where we've consulted young people, and by the time anything's got round to being done, they're up and gone away. So it is important that you've got a fairly tight timetable, so that people know exactly what is happening. And you are saying that you're going to recruit every 2 years, that people have to go reapply or get elected. And of course, what happens with those people that have gone off before that time? Are you going to recruit them at any time, or is it only going to be a recruitment at the end of a set period of time? So a great idea. Glad that it is happening for the young people concerned, because they don't want to come and listen to us as fuddy-duddies in council meetings. And we have experience of that, because they're never here, except we've got one today, which is great. But we don't usually have that, and it is important that we recognise the worth of young people. They are our future, and they are incredibly important to us.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Latham.
Yeah, paragraph 1, 2 of the executive summary talks about institutional expertise. The word institutional can have 2 very different, but possibly both relevant to this. What do we mean by institutional?
Is that Councillor Cox, you want to respond to that, or anybody want to respond to that? And also you can, well, I think your questions were feeding into Councillor Evans as to what hopefully will go into the scheme going forward, or be thought possibly part of the scheme going forward, those questions, but if Councillor Cox can answer them, then fine. Or Councillor Fuller.
I think the point that it's getting at is that we frequently rely on institutional expertise, i.e. the expertise of the institution of the local authority. What we really want to do is start blending actually what the knowledge and the skill set that we have within the council with those that are held within the community. And then actually truly blending those is, I think, an incredibly difficult task, but one that will pay off dividends in reams in the long term.
Councillor Cox, your response to Councillor Evans, the questions? Q&As, have you got a response at this time or not?
With regards to the number of schools, the clear objective in my mind is more than two as we go forward. I think otherwise, to me, we are missing out then in certain areas of catchment that those schools have. And that would mean, in terms of our district, we're then losing out on that. So I think as time goes by, it's clear that we need to increase that. And I would probably like to look at increasing it ASAP rather than later. So that is certainly in my mind. And certainly in terms of the two schools, we'll be looking at a Lichfield school and a Burntwood school to ensure that we're initially on the two. So we've got that balance in our two major settlements. A lot of, for example, just my ward, don't go to Lichfield district schools. They go to Rugeley or John Taylor, for example. So in that question, we've got to be obviously, which leads on probably nicely to, in a sense, how do we move on? And colleges, we would have to review the colleges, because clearly there are a number of people that do leave at the age of 15, 16 and go on to further education elsewhere. So these are kind of things I think we've just got to look at. But this is, you know, as I repeat, is a pilot. Let's look at seeing how we get on with those two schools.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a generic point, really, I think we as local authorities, we frequently try and get everything right before we attempt to do anything, and we want to map it out perfectly. We all know that's not a realistic way of working. We're better off actually making a start and then ramping it up incrementally and learning as we go. And so I suppose I think they're perfectly valid points. I think, you know, Councillor Cox and his officers will take that on equally. Let's get started and move on gradually so that we're able to, you know, in a couple of years' time, we've got what's really, really working, and it's working well. And we haven't tried to bite off more than we can chew in the first instance.
Yeah, and equally there are other authorities that have youth councils in place. So there's lots out there that we can probably get information on, or, you know, models of how they do it in other authorities when we're looking at doing that. Yeah, Councillor Sylvester.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a great idea, and in other areas I have indeed been part of youth council, and also delivering in a very non-political way, I would add, youth parliaments, and it is a very powerful thing, especially for the young people, to be involved with. I would actually add, because I'd seen the comment in there about 2 or 3 schools, and I think that giving everybody the opportunity at this point is a more inclusive way of trying to do that. I think there are some exceptionally good schools within the district that also have strong debating groups, so I think we'll be very keen to want to take part, as opposed to maybe cherry picking a couple at the beginning. I'd seen the flexibility on the 2 or 3, and that was one of the things that I was interested to have a look at. And especially the safeguarding statements, you know, having been a governor now for more years than probably I care to remember as well, that having a safeguarding statement I think would be imperative. So when you've got the elections that are taking place, there's still going to be assembly here, and there's still going to have adults that will be present, and I think that having a statement on that would be something that's imperative. It's not reinventing the wheel. It is being done successfully in other areas for sure. And then a specific question on the budget with regards to the minibus. I noticed that it's gone on there, using the youth council budget or provide a separate budget for the running of minibus transport. I'm assuming that's something that they're just going to contract out, as opposed to having a minibus permanently that they're going to only use intermittently. Yeah. Thanks.
The short answer to that is it would be something that would be hiring rather than by contract or buying. I don't think it'd be quite cost effective for 1 second. Yeah, that answers that. Can I just go back to the age range that Councillor Evans referred to, 11 to 18? I think it is right that we try and capture that wide range of opinion between the ages of 11 and 18. But I think we also then know that actually those opinions, as one gets older, through your age group, it can vastly change as time goes by. But I think that was the idea, was to certainly capture from 11 to 18 to ensure that we are getting those wide range of opinions rather than just a small section of age group that again is not necessarily inclusive when you use the word youth.
That's exactly what I meant. But I was also referring to year 11, as part of which do something.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not the only councillor tonight who said that we think this is a good idea and it's something that we should be looking into. Can I just ask though, what is the definition of senior school that we're going to be using?
You're correct.
I'll jump in there. Defining defining senior school is a surprisingly difficult task, and I think it is not necessarily a bad place to start in terms of our thinking on this, but I think there's a better way to do it. Staff County Council will actually give us a bit of a blueprint for this. There are 4 school planning areas in Lichfield district. So there's Lichfield, which includes a huge number of the villages around, Burnwood, which mainly is the town of Burnwood, and a huge amount of the town of school planning area is in Lichfield district, and a very small amount of the Rugeley one, literally just your ward, and not even all of it. I think there's actually a potential where we could use that as a basis to build our makeup of councillors, how we wanted to do them in a particular way, and we could do things to deliberately ensure that we are making sure we get that range. So one of the things I know for a fact, and I do have some experience teaching in secondary schools, it was almost a decade. If you put a bunch of mixed range kids in a room, the year 7s will not speak while year 11 are in there, because they are scared of the big hairy smelly ones, which I was at one point as well. So I think there is an element of things that we could say along those lines. I think we can potentially solve a few of these by going back to that idea of 6 councillors from each senior school. Not necessarily, I mean, are we including Maple Hayes, for instance? Are we including Lichfield Cathedral School? Because again, 6 from Lichfield Cathedral School is a much higher percentage than say 6 at King Edward's or a Chase Terrace or one of the other ones. So I think there's a lot of work needs to go into that, I think. I also think it would be worthwhile potentially saying that we want to reserve a certain number of seats for seats in our council for Key Stage 3 pupils, and we want to reserve a number for Key Stage 4 pupils, because that will ensure that we get that range of younger and older pupils. I think there's a lot of work that can go into there, and I'm more than happy to pick this up at a later date with the cabinet member if he thinks that's helpful. I'll stick something in the diary and we can have a look into that. In terms of the pilot, I'd be a bit concerned if we didn't see any representation at all from the Tamworth school planning area. That's quite a big section of our district. I'm aware there's that slight anomaly with just part of one of our wards being in the Rugeley district for a pilot. I can see there's a justification for that, but I think unless anybody corrects me, I think the rural school, at least part of it, is actually in our district and not in Tamworth. Yeah. So again, I think that's a really big anomaly almost, because it's definitely part of Tamworth. There's no two ways about it, but it's just over the line. So I think starting with 3 schools would be much stronger than 2, because we're going to include that area that's in the other constituency. And then the final point that I wanted to make on this, if I can, Councillor Cox, I think we need to be very careful that we have enough support for our youth councillors, not just in terms of come to the meeting, this is where you sit, this is how a chairperson works, this is how a committee structure works, which is really valuable. And there is a lot of support that we are going to be able to provide there, and it's going to be very valuable for me. But also to make sure that when we've elected these councillors, that they're aware that they have a huge power of going out there and being an advocate, talking to people and getting views and bringing it in and doing the outreach work, not just the in-reach work. So I think that's that. And then my very final point, what consideration have we made for homeschool pupils and children who get elected to this council who may have special educational needs and disabilities?
Yeah, some really good points there to be taken up on. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. I have a 16-year-old who goes to school in Lichfield, and I've discussed the policy broadly with her, and she's very enthusiastic, and like has been said before, it's a great idea. So I don't think you'll be short of potential candidates. A couple of questions I've got. By the way, I need to get in quicker because most of my questions have already been asked. What's the mechanism to measure the success of the pilot? And would there be any training for the potential youth councillors? Thanks.
Thank you. While you think about that, Councillor Cross, we'll go to Councillor Norman.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask two fundamental questions first before I go on to any other questions from Councillor Cox. Is why a youth council? Community strategy doesn't specify particular communities. So I'd like to know why youth council is the first one to be looked at, and the cost of £60,000. And the second question, fundamental question might be, is what services will be improved that are actually run by Lichfield District Council if we listen to young people and they say this or that? I mean, is it all being passed on to the county? How much would actually be enacted upon by this district? What responsibilities do we have? Two fundamental questions: why youth council? Community strategy is not about young people alone, and also what services do we do?
Did you want to come back in now on there, Councillor Cox?
Yeah,
Thank you.
more than happy if I could come back to Councillor Richard Cross. So measures of success, I think that is something we are going to be going along with to see how successful it goes. So I think that is again something that can come back to the scrutiny committee in terms of how we get to where we are to see whether we feel it's been successful. Don't forget there will be support, LD support, but the other side of the main support which we've had is from Skiddies, who are Staffordshire, which will really be the ones that expertise within the youth services. So in terms of their help, I'm sure they're going to be guiding us on the way. I think it's like anything in terms of training. If there isn't levels of training in the process, then we've already failed. So I think there has to be an element of training that will go, because you're not going to be expected to run with it. So there's going to be obviously a training program that will enhance their views. Then come back to Councillor Norman. Yeah, why youth within our community? Yes, it's a section of our community, but is it not a section of the community that is vastly underrepresented? And therefore we are looking at wanting to make sure that they are inclusive. Is it not that we've had anecdotal or even examples of where young people are just ignored, never even asked the question to? So I think that is clear why we're looking at that section. And services, the services of this council as a whole, I think they have, if we're to say our community, everything we do within this council has a broad brush across everybody in terms of what age group or demographic you are in. We're trying to obviously achieve that. So of course, that is what I feel that we'll be looking at, the services of the council.
Councillor Grange, you indicated you want to come back.
Thank you. It's just a brief point. And it was something that Councillor Sylvester Hall said that just sparked a kind of point in my head. I think there's a risk picking up the point about diversity and the hard to reach part of our community. If we start segmenting youth into different levels, there is a risk that we just get prefects and the kids that join the debating societies, and I don't think that will be representative. We also need to make sure that there's enough for the kids that are hanging around playgrounds because they've got nothing to do, because their voices need to be heard as much as the kids who would naturally gravitate towards this. So I think somehow, and I've got no answer, but somehow we need to make sure that it's not just that top slotty group of which I was one at school, so I feel I can speak more for them. But it's a cross section. It's truly representative of everyone that is in that age group. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's noted. I mean, I don't have the answers to that because that's not quite easy. And don't quote me, you can quote me, but I absolutely can quote me, but it's in a sense, if you try and make sure that you are across all areas, there is the danger that the consequence of doing that is actually you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So it very clearly is, it usually is, you put it, the ones that are quite vocal and so forth, that are going to actually engage more than the others, but we've got to look at somehow, and we'll have to look at that. Can I come back to a couple of issues that Councillor Robertson raised? I don't think we've necessarily covered those. I'm more than happy to take the expertise of somebody that understands the education and where we go with this. I must admit, my definition of senior school is probably high school, but you're obviously
Not in the district.
not in the district. So it's clear, obviously, there's something to be looked at, and obviously taking on board what you're saying about key stage 3 and 4, so forth. And yes, that Tamworth scenario. I think, again, from what we're really the long-term objective would be, is to create that youth council that is going to broaden our way through to obviously include those areas, and including areas of Maple Hayes and the cathedral school. So not to exclude. So it is then all inclusive. We could start with the cathedral school. As a district point of view, how inclusive is that? So in a sense, you know, there'll be caution, because that might mean that actually we're not looking at Main Street. So we would have a caution to that, but certainly the cathedral school, you know, will be part of the discussions, and if I were to say have been. So, you know, at that point, but it's a question of getting the two right, and certainly from, I think, Lichfield and perhaps if there is scope, we look at 3 to kick off with 3.
Councillor Fulham.
There was another question there about what consideration has been given to people, children with special educational needs, and declare an interest with a teenage son and a special education needs school in Saxon Hill. So that's going to be taken on a case by case basis, right? Because there is no such thing as a school that has the same needs. So we need to go and speak to the individual schools about that and see how they best would engage, and that'd be very different for somebody at Queen's Croft than it would be from Saxon Hill, for instance, because there's a variety of different special educational needs there. We're aware of that, we're alive to that, and it's going to be part of the work that we're doing to work out how we can genuinely engage and have a proper representation from across the district. As we know around this chamber, it's difficult to get a district council which is representative of the district, and there will be equal challenges with this, but they're challenges that we're aware of and alive to, and we'll be working to overcome.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Yes, I want to stick to the fundamentals really, which is why the youth council was chosen of all the different community groups that are available. There ought to be some reason for that. There are disabled. There's the disabled community. There's the older community that's difficult with IT and blue bags, and there's also the rural communities that have difficulty with transport. So what I want to know is when they might be considered as well in the communication strategy, which this is all about. If I quote from there, the aim of the strategy is to understand our communities and their communication needs in order to tailor our communication methods and content to keep them informed and engaged. So the question is really, at the end of the day, and Councillor Cross referred to this, how do you measure it? Now, I'm going to guess that what they'll say is, well, we want a bowling alley, we want a cinema in Birdwood, and we want help with the transport, cheaper bus route, which the county used to do. They might even want a youth book, which also the county used to do. So what you're going to do when they make those points? Because the worst of all of this outcome would be that you've heard what you said, and we're going to ignore you. So it was the same with the brown bins. The majority of people said when we consulted them, we don't want to be charged for brown bins, we charge for brown bins. The majority of people said, and I'm not one of them, by the way, was that we get rid of the civic car, but we still got a civic car. This isn't new. When I was first on the council, in fact, the Burntwood Chase Challenge, we had young people there to the meetings, and in fact, in Burntwood, there was young girls there that actually wanted better lighting in the area in certain places because of sexual attacks, and that was quite important. Unfortunately, there was a councillor there no longer here that of course upset them because they weren't listened to properly, and there's a bit of patronisation, but that was an issue. In the neighbourhood plan, I went and gave a talk, and trust me, giving a talk to a sixth form isn't easy, on the neighbourhood plan, and left a box there for people to put their views in, and that was taken to the neighbourhood plan. And then on the town council, there's a planning advisory group, and by the way, I'm still waiting for my map to come back from the school that I sent it to for them to put in them on that map what issues where the issues were that they were talking about. Only last week, and it wasn't to do with this, I was listening to and talking to the member of the steering group of the Youth Parliament, and every school has a school council. Are they going to be involved at all? I still need to be convinced there's a need for a youth council, and the most important thing of all is, at the end of the day, what you're going to do is going to listen to you. We'll feel better now. We've listened to you young people, but we ain't going to do anything about it. That's what I want to know. What, at the end of the day, will the council do when they say they want this improvement, that improvement, and this sort of service and that sort of service? Straightforward question, really.
Councillor.
Thanks, Chairman. I think Councillor Norman does a disservice to the youth of our district when he says they'll just come up with a bowling alley.
I didn't say just, I mean, but that will be there.
I think that actually having honest conversations with our residents is really important, and so setting out the framework for the youth council will be really important. Setting out what these conversations will look like will be really important, and it's not just a list of what do you want and therefore we will go and do it. It's an honest conversation about these are the challenges that we jointly are facing as a district. How can we help solve those? How can you help us as a district council come up with fresher ideas and different ideas and help us to see new angles to challenges, long-term challenges that exist? And equally, what can we do to help you in some of the challenges that you face? In terms of why a youth council, it may have escaped Councillor Norman's attention that if you are between 11 and 17, you cannot come and sit in this chamber. If you're from a rural area of the district or disabled or elderly, you can still come and get elected and sit in this chamber and help make part of those decisions. The group between 11 and 17 cannot, which is why it's so important for us to focus special attention on that group to make sure they have a voice which is heard here at the council.
If I can just interject there, I was fortunate yesterday when I was in LDC to be able to speak to our work experience chap who's been here and has had a chance to have a look at this paper. So it's fortunate for us that we do have the views of someone at that age that could possibly be involved in this, and very enthusiastically he said that there are obviously numbers of issues that need to be addressed, many of which we've spoken about tonight. But things like, would the meetings be in public? Would we set our own agendas, or are the agenda set by the district council? So are we commenting on things or policy that the district council are doing? The budget, what happens to the budget? How is that spent? How is that managed? Things that we've mentioned tonight, but overwhelmingly support that. It's good to see that, you know, the council is going forward and is suggesting that there's a place for the youth to actually have an input into the life of the council. And obviously from that we would hope that people may well then take that forward when they've left school and become future councillors of this great district, etc. So I think it was really useful for us to have that. And as I say, a lot of the things that we have mentioned actually was mentioned by the work experience colleague that's been with us. So I think that was really good, including the fact that it's all inclusive of the ages and who we're going to use and how will that work. So I think we've talked about it a lot. I think there is overwhelming support from. Yep.
When does it start? Because we've got there's need to increase the medium-term financial strategy over the next 3 financial years, but is that the following year and then the following 2 years, or was it this year as well? That's a question Anybody can answer, really.
Councillor Cox, do you have that? Answer that or not?
Well, the way I can answer it, if I understand correctly, is that we're budgeting £10,000 for 2022-23, which effectively the scheme, gets further cabinet approval, is that we'll be hitting and running with this for September, and taking it forward. The increase in budget then is reflective of then how we are developing it going forward. So I don't know whether that does answer Councillor Norman's question.
Councillor Norman?
Well, I'm just not sure when the MTFS needs to be involved and rewritten it in a sense regarding, or amended rather, go over the top there, amended when with budgets, because we had that with the council allowances issue. We'd have to look at the MTFS again. And so I'd perhaps get some clarification of the audit and scrutiny committee. You know, I'm not trying to pin, certainly not trying to pin Councillor Cox down, but hopefully I'll get some an answer before then and get some clarity.
If it help the financial implications. Part of the paper, it sets out that there's £10,000 in 22-23, £20,000 in 23-24, and £30,000 in 24-25. That's where the £60,000 will be spent.
Just be clear, then it's not in the budget at the moment, which we only agreed a few weeks ago. Oh dear, right. Correct. Again, Councillor Struck is shaking his head. What's been used to him then? So, okay, thank you. We'll take this up further.
As I was saying, it seems that we have overwhelming support for this going forward. What I would like to know from the group, whether we think, and I know Councillor Robertson is very keen, has a lot of experience in this, whether we think this is an item that we ought to consider a task group to look into, or do you think we've given the information to the portfolio holders to be able to come back with something, with perhaps the help of a number of councillors outside of the meeting to do that, or whether you want it to actually be more set up, more official in its standing. Councillor Robert. Councillor Robert.
I just wanted to add, which probably what I could have done with starting with, is that the council approved a new community power strategy. And surely this is something that is going to enable us to fit within that strategy. So otherwise, if we don't do anything in terms of our community, and I recognise there's a broad sections of our society, but we have to start at some point putting the meat on the bones with regards to the community power strategy, and I think this goes a long way to do so. So that is in a sense what I would like just to add.
Fine.
Which
Yeah,
I probably
you have,
should have said
you have there's a Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think this needs a task group now. Across the first year, the pilot scheme, I know Councillor Cox has been given quite a bit of homework by this committee today, but I think they're all points that he can go away. You can work on those stuff we're maybe going to catch up on. But I think for £10,000 in an initial year, we may need to review it at the end of the pilot. At that point, we might need a task group. Yeah. But I think in terms of officer time, the costs of running a task group on this is going to rapidly increase that £10,000. So I can't see anything.
Everyone's fine with that. Yep. Looking at the work programme, I think it's due to come back I think it's on September's work programme for it to come back. I mean, I don't know the timescale whether you're looking to deliver it actually in the term time in September or not, or just hadn't particularly got a date in mind for delivery of the pilot. But it's due to come back, I think, on the 15th of September to us. Would that be the timescale for it to come back and then for it to be launched after that date? Is that your thinking?
I think in reality, we're going to struggle to get it launched before the 15th of September. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see a model come back to the meeting. Oh, it hasn't got another date, but September would be a good time to bring a policy.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a discussion about what we can bring back to scrutiny. As the leaders just alluded to, it may be too early, but let's work to it and let's see. But nothing worse than wasting your time if we're not quite ready for you.
Okay, so I think you've got quite a bit of information there that's come from the committee this evening for you to use. And obviously, if anybody else has got anything outside this meeting they want to share with the portfolio, please feel free to do that. And then we'll have a look at a scheme, if possible, in September or whenever you're able to do that. So, yeah, thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor Cox. Item 7 is the community power strategy proposal for area panels. A verbal report. Is this you again, Councillor Cox, or is it the leader?
No, I'm actually giving it to the leader.
Oh, very good.
Been delegated to me, Chairman. Thank you. Can just say, I think from that discussion on the youth council, really helpful and exactly what we can do as ONS, right, to really genuinely add value there. So thank you to everyone for the feedback on that. In reality, this item has come far too early in the traditional sense to ONS, but actually, given what we're trying to do, I think it's come at the right time, because actually we're coming in much earlier to overview and scrutiny. We're not coming with a fully formed plan on what this looks like. What we are coming with is an idea of what we want to achieve, and saying actually we'd really like ONS's input throughout this to make sure that we get it right, or as near as right as we can get it for our starter. So area panels, locality-based working, local area committees, community governance, variety of names of what we're trying to achieve here. We spend well over £10 million throughout the district each year, and this is about taking a small slice of that budget and focusing it on areas that have a distinct sense of community and place, and ring-fencing that budget and allowing ward councillors with their communities to make decisions about where that budget ought to be spent. The reality is that decisions about communities are best made by those closest to their communities. We frequently say to central government, allow us to make decisions about our community, but actually, even as a district council, we can go further and we can say, well, actually, there are individual communities that have disparate needs within our district. So how do we allow those communities to make more of the decisions about what's happening to them? The idea is that ward councillors, supported by council officers and working within a well-defined framework, will be able to work with local community organisations in an open and transparent manner in identifying the most important issues in their local area, working together to find solutions to those issues, and if necessary, use some of the funding that's been allocated to them to address those, or perhaps trying to seek funding from other sources as well. And that could be addressing antisocial behaviour, it could be improvements to the local park, it could be community events, it could be infrastructure items. I really hope that this will start enabling ward councillors to work even more closely with their local communities, backed up by officer support and a budget to address the issues that matter to them in their local areas. Happy to take any questions at this stage, but Chairman, I think the ask from me really is, this is where I'd really like us to head over the next year or so. It's going to take a fair amount of work. We've just heard some of the questions that have come up from the youth council, which is a fairly well-defined concept. I'll be really honest and say this is a less well-defined concept, so it exists up and down the country, but Lichfield District will have its own unique flavour of that, and I'd really welcome ONS's support and input into making this the very best that it can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. As you were talking, Councillor Pullen, I guess the one question that went through my head is, how is this different from parish councils? Haven't we already got that sort of infrastructure in place where we have a layer beneath us that are making those local decisions? So I guess it's a question, how is it different? How would it complement? How would that interact? I think we've already heard reports this evening from kind of the communication issues between the town council and district council. If we're now throwing another group of people into that mix, is it not just going to overcomplicate?
Thank you. Councillor Normal, would you like a few? We'll come back, Councillor Pullen, we'll go to Pew.
Yeah, related to what Councillor Granger said, which is there needs to be transparent. I mean, some work involved, obviously. I hope that we get an early draft back to the committee there to help cabinet members on that, because there needs to be a defined framework. If it's not going to be parishes, and it's going to be within parishes, which would be the case with Lichfield City and Burnwood, I think, then exactly what are those borders and why? I said it needs to be some sort of transparent and fair system. Also, it's going to be a devolved budget of some sort. That is what all the local authorities do. And also to say it's not new, even in Lichfield districts. I was a member of the Burtwood Advisory Group, which did exist some years ago. So it's not new, but I'm happy to look to report in future. But it needs to be a transparent one, how it's defined. Doesn't duplicate parish councils, although there could be an overlap there, but it is that's going to be a bit of a headache, I think, to try and work that out. I don't know whether Faisal and Marlow will say that, well, I thought we were in Tamworth, so I don't know what's going to happen really there. But I look forward to an early draft and be reassured of an early draft for the scrutiny to help them, to help the cabinet along. That would be good.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, this is a task group.
Absolutely.
Part of this task group.
Absolutely.
That one was, this
We've
one
got a blank piece of paper. Yeah, absolutely, councillor.
and
Is that it? Oh, sorry.
I think on that point, I think it's important that we've had something early. One of my concerns when things come early is the issues that we had around the Council Community Fund and the blue bags, where they came to scrutiny really early, which is good practice, but then there wasn't that kind of second check-in. So I think having a group on this is really important. And the second kind of couple of queries I've got for the leader on this. First one is, how much are we talking? Because I think we've got to make sure that that's substantial enough to make a difference, but not so substantial that it's A, causes its own problems, and B, has a horrific impact on our revenue budget or capital budget. Second question, is this revenue capital both, either, neither? Because I think that's really quite important. And I know the direction of travel from central government at the minute is let's just spend loads of capital without necessarily looking at the revenue side of it, which doesn't work. So yeah, I suppose those are kind of my points for now.
Anybody else before bringing Councillor Pullen? Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll take them in hopefully the order that I was asked and touch on all of those. So really good point about how different from parish councils, and a question that's been asked lots of times and probably don't have a suitably clear answer to at the moment. But I think the reality is that, as Councillor Gordon touched on, an area like Lichfield or Bournemouth, for instance, which has a fairly large parish council, could easily be split down into a couple of different area committees, whereas some more rural parishes may very well, one area committee may sit across numerous parish councils. So I think equally it's more about delivering the Lichfield District Council's priorities using existing budgets to those areas rather than looking for new and extra things to do. So it's not just about carving some of our budget out to go and do extra additional stuff. It's really saying what are our priorities as a district council and our responsibilities, and making much more local decision making about how that funding is directed. In terms of a budget, yes, there'll be an element of budget there. In terms of number, that's an argument that I'm currently having at the moment with finance people, etc. But you're quite right, it needs to be enough to make a difference. But is it going to be millions of pounds per group? No, absolutely it's not. And it will be revenue funding rather than capital funding. But my thought there is that it needs to be revenue funding with a view to drawing down capital funding from external sources to try and draw that in where appropriate, and whether that's from this council or from other bodies, then I'm sort of agnostic as to that, but hopefully it'll provide the vehicle to focus on that capital investment throughout the district. In terms of bringing it early, thank you, Councillor Robertson. Yes, we have brought it early. There won't just be a second check-in, there will be consistent check-in over a regular period, I can assure you, to make sure that we're doing the best that we can with this. And just on Councillor Norman's point about him being a member of BAG, I didn't know you were a member of BAG, but glad to know that, Councillor Norman.
Thank you for that. So we will at some stage see some sort of brief, will we, that will come through from the cabinet, so that we can, or do you want us to sort of go with a blank sheet and set up a task group and start?
Sorry, Jack. Why don't we provide a framework to you as a starting point? If you think actually that framework's wrong and you want to go elsewhere, great, let's have that conversation. But I think having a framework to begin with would be helpful rather than an entire blank piece of paper. And if that's helpful, Jack.
That's fine. Is everyone happy with that? That we'll have that. Then we'll set up a task group to start working on this. Councillor Norman.
As long as we run the task, as long as we run the subject through the task group system, which we have to make sure it passes all the tests to involve members over how many weeks.
Yeah, we'll make sure that it does that. Is everybody happy with that process going forward? Yeah, okay. Oh, councillor Adam?
I'm not happy with the idea of setting tax groups up just because we've got something going on. I think we have to be fair to allow whatever it is to run here. And you as chairman, the person who can check and vet everything that goes on and then make that decision or make the recommendation to the committee. But now is the time or now is not the time.
The problem is we haven't got anything to look at. We haven't got anything to vet.
Once you've got a framework, you can look at it, let it run, if you need it, and I recall that we did say originally, we didn't think we needed as many tax groups as we've got, then we can set one up, but this will take a long time to get it moving, and I think we'll have a tax group chair sitting there waiting for something to happen.
I think in this case, we have a real opportunity to actually make a statement to this committee of what we think, how that should work and how it will work going forward. So I think, and the experience that we have, not just in this committee, but those members outside of this committee that can be brought into a task group to help us and to help the cabinet, because I think the cabinet are asking for our support in pushing together this strategy going forward. So I do think at an early stage, we have a great opportunity to influence how we want it to be and how we want it to be set up, rather than waiting for cabinet to come back to us in however long months' time and then for us to say, well, actually, we would have liked to have seen this. This gives us a chance at the ground root stage to actually put in what we think should be in that term.
This is what we want to do and this is how we're going to do it model before we say we need to.
I think we are going to get from cabinet, we are going to get a briefing document or a scoping document that we can use in formulating that going forward.
Just to help the chair on that, we can make a commitment to get it done as quickly as possible to assist the committee. We'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillor. Anybody else, any other comments before we move on? So the next item is the work programme. Okay, so we have the work programme. Any comments on the work programme? We're looking at obviously now the September, so we've got coming forward in the September the dual waste recycling review that's being undertaken at the moment. We've got that as well as local council tax support scheme. I'm looking at Councillor Strachan for that. That comes in September. And then we've also got in September the MTFS. And we will at that stage, or we want before, get the date and the diary for the budget meeting that we're going to have to help the cabinet formulate setting the budget next year and any ideas and thoughts that we can have to come to this committee. That will be a meeting in December. I think we were thinking end of November, beginning of December for that. We will obviously have a pre-group meeting ahead of the meeting in September, and we'll make sure that papers are out early so that we can have that meeting ahead of the actual scrutiny meeting on the 15th of September. Anything else on that? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on notes from task groups, I know we've got them in there. You know, we've had the update from the City Centre Master Plan Group and the Council Community Fund. Next to the new leisure centre, I know, and the climate change one, and the dual stream recycling one, we don't currently have that booked in. Is that at the behest of the chairs? The reason why I'm so concerned is I've been informed tonight as a member of the new leisure centre task group that we've made a bid to the Levelling Up Fund level 2, round 2, which when I walked into this meeting, I'm not been made aware of. There are 2 other members of the task group here. I'm prepared to be told I missed something. They're both shaking their heads. I would expect that type of stuff to go through the task group, if I'm honest. So I think we might just need to touch base with those task group chairs to make sure that they're meeting regularly enough, that they're getting the updates they need to, and that they're bringing it to here. So
I will do that, definitely.
Okay, right. Look, money, right.
Councillor Fuller.
I welcome the fact that you're excited about the funding application. The application has not gone in yet, and so we will be making an application to LUF round 2. That hasn't gone in yet, so hopefully you will get an opportunity to have that discussed with you. I suppose I would say just one item on there, the task group has rightly been pushing for additional funding for that leisure centre, I suppose we took that away as an ask to go and get it paid for as an executive, and we've gone out and tried to find some money for it. I suppose I didn't think it was going to be a contentious item that we were seeking a rather large sum of money from the central government to deliver the task group's ambitions. But I do accept there's some comms improvement there. But yeah, we will. Yeah, it's not gone in yet, so that's still a conversation to have.
Can I just a quick question, Chair? Sorry, because I maybe you could enlighten me, because I don't know. How does it work with the scheduling task groups and how that works? Because I've already had a meeting with the chairman of that task group and filled her in on all of this and things and everything else. So I was assuming that there'll be a task group schedule shortly thereafter to do that. So I think Councillor Watson, it's just the timing thing with that information, because that's literally just come out.
What I will do, I will speak to the chairmen of the task groups and see where they are and make sure they are meeting regularly. And if they've got a report to bring back, even if it's a written report to this committee, that we can see that, even if they didn't actually want to come and present to us at our next meeting in September. So I'll get onto that just to make sure that we are fully, because it's important that they come back and report to us, because this is the committee that needs to go to for us to actually put forward any recommendations toward the cabinet. So I will get onto the task group chairman and make sure that is happening.
But just to be clear, that decision to make the look good is only been making quite recently, and the chairman has only been briefed in the last couple of weeks or so.
Thank you for that. Anything else from anybody on the work programme? No, that's fine. So we can say at 19:40, we can close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.